The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the streets into black mirrors, reflecting neon and lies. Inside the convenience store on 5th and Lexington, fluorescent lights hummed over aisles of packaged salvation and midnight desperation. The TV mounted in the corner played its endless loop, Vought International's latest campaign, all gleaming smiles and orchestrated heroism. 3 men in ski masks didn't care about the broadcast. They cared about the register. "Open it." The lead gunman pressed his 9mm against the clerk's temple, the metal-kissed skin still warm with fear. "Open it now, or I paint the cigarette display with your—" The lights died, not flickered, not dimmed, died. Every bulb in the store went dark simultaneously, as if the building itself had stopped breathing. The TV cut to static snow. Outside, streetlights guttered and failed in a cascade of darkness that spread like infection. The robbers froze. In the sudden blackness, their breathing became the loudest sound in the world. Then came the laughter. It started soft, almost musical, a sound that didn't belong to any human throat. It built in layers, harmonizing with itself, echoing from places that shouldn't echo. The clerk's eyes went wide. The gunman spun a weapon tracking toward nothing, toward everywhere. "Who's there?" His voice cracked. "Show yourself." A spotlight snapped on, not from any fixture in the store, just appeared hanging in the air like stage lighting in a theater that didn't exist. It illuminated a figure that hadn't been there 3 seconds ago. Green, impossibly vividly green. A face that stretched 2 wide teeth that gleamed like porcelain tombstones in a grin that physics shouldn't allow. Yellow eyes that burned with cartoon malice and childlike glee. The suit was yellow, bright enough to hurt, and the tie was red like a wound. "Gentlemen?" The voice rolled out smooth as oil on water, theatrical as a carnival barker's pitch. "I see you're making a withdrawal. Unfortunately, this establishment's customer service has been temporarily suspended." The mask tilted his head at an angle that would have snapped a normal spine. The lead gunman pulled the trigger 3 times. Fast succession professional grouping center mass. The bullets flew true. The mask's chest exploded, not into blood and bone, but into confetti. Red and white streamers erupted from the impact points, spiraling upward in mockery of gravity. His body inflated like a balloon's, absorbed the energy, then snapped back to shape with a sound like a rubber band pulled taut. "Oh, my." The mask clutched his chest in mock horror. "You've wounded me. I'm... He paused, eyes rolling back. "I'm fine." He pulled a comically oversized mallet from behind his back from nowhere, from a space that couldn't contain it. The hammerhead was bigger than a watermelon. It had a happy face painted on one side. The gunman fired again. The mallet swung. Metal met cartoon physics. The gun twisted barrel curling back on itself like taffy in a heat lamp until it resembled a sad balloon animal. The trigger guard formed a bow. The mask plucked it from the robber's numb fingers. "Adorable." He held up the ruined weapon. "But I prefer my violence non-lethal." The second robber rushed him with a knife. Predictable. The mask didn't dodge. He reached into his jacket, the same jacket that moments ago had been skin-tight, and pulled out a phone directory. Yellow pages, 2,000 pages thick. He held it up like a shield. The knife plunged into the book. Stuck. The robber pulled. Nothing. Pulled harder. The mask let go. The man stumbled backwards, still gripping the knife buried in a tome of outdated contact information, and crashed into a display of motor oil. Bottles rained down. The floor became a slick nightmare. The third gunman, smarter or more terrified, ran for the door. The mask was already there. Not running, just there. Space folded around him like a curtain pulled aside. Leaving so soon? He leaned against the door frame, ankles crossed, inspecting his gloves. But we haven't even exchanged insurance information. The robber threw a wild haymaker. The mask's head detached from his shoulders, floating upward to avoid the punch, then descended back onto his neck with a wet pop. "Rude," the floating head said midair. Then, reunited with his body, "Let me show you how we say goodbye in polite society." He snapped his fingers. The electrical cords from the dead freezer units came alive. Not sparking. Moving. They slithered across the floor like pythons made of copper and rubber wrapping around the three men's ankles, wrists, waists. Within seconds, the robbers were bound together in a knot that would have made a sailor weep with envy. The mask circled them, hands clasped behind his back, surveying his work like an artist appraising a sculpture. "Now then." He produced a sticker from thin air, a Vought International logo. The clean blue and white design that plastered every bus stop and billboard in the city. He held it up, examined it with mock reverence, then drew a thick red X across the logo with a marker that materialized in his other hand. He pressed the defaced sticker onto the lead gunman's forehead. "Consider this a brand adjustment." The mask's grin stretched wider, impossibly wider. "Vought promises protection. I provide truth in advertising." The lights flickered back on. The TV resumed its programming mid-sentence, as if the universe itself had simply paused for a commercial break. The mask was gone. The robbers remained tied in electrical wire, one of them wearing corporate blasphemy on his face. The clerk stood behind the counter, hands still raised, trying to process whether he'd just witnessed a miracle or a mental breakdown. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Stanley Ipkiss stumbled into his apartment at 2 a.m, soaked to the bone, shaking like he'd touched a live wire. The mask was in his messenger bag. He could feel it through the canvas, warm, pulsing, alive in ways that made his skin crawl and his heart race. He locked the door, chain, deadbolt. The flimsy security theater that separated inside from outside. His reflection stared back from the bathroom mirror, pale, ordinary, forgettable. Thinning hair, weak chin, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. He pressed his palms against the sink knuckles white. "Just once," he whispered. "I said just once." But his hands were still trembling with adrenaline. With something else. With the memory of power that didn't ask permission, that simply was. He'd seen them. The soups in the alley behind the venue where he worked part-time, clearing tables, invisible as wallpaper. He'd seen them. Corner the witness, a woman who'd filmed something she shouldn't have on her phone. He'd seen the way they smiled while explaining how accidents happen to people who don't understand discretion. Those Vought-sponsored heroes with their perfect teeth and rehearsed concerned voices, honey-sweet and eyes empty as graves. Stanley had wanted to look away. Should have looked away. Instead, he'd reached into his bag. The mask had been waiting. Now standing in his tiny bathroom with its flickering bulb and water-stained ceiling, Stanley opened the messenger bag. The mask gleamed up at him, green as envy, smooth as sin. Wooden, ancient, impossible. He picked it up. It was warm. "No more," he told it. Told himself. "This isn't... I'm not..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Wasn't what? A vigilante, a freak, something worse. Stanley walked to his bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of his dresser, and placed the mask inside. Covered it with old t-shirts and forgotten sweaters, closed the drawer. locked it with the small key he kept on his keychain. There. Contained. Safe. He turned off the lights and climbed into bed, still dressed, too exhausted to care. Sleep came fast, deep and dreamless. At 3:17 in the morning, the locked drawer opened. Not violently. No splintering wood or broken metal. The lock simply disengaged. The drawer slid out on its rails, smooth and silent. Green light spilled across the floor. The mask sat atop the pile of fabric no longer buried. It rested there like a patient predator waiting for the next act. From somewhere in its carved surface, impossible to pinpoint, came a sound. Laughter. Soft, musical, hungry, the kind of laughter that promised the show had only just begun. Outside, the rain continued to fall on a city that sold heroism like breakfast cereal and packaged justice in focus-grouped slogans. Somewhere in a crisis room with floor-to-ceiling monitors, someone was already reviewing security footage. Somewhere in a safe house, someone was already planning how to weaponize what they'd seen. And in a drawer that shouldn't be open, something that shouldn't exist was breathing. The mask waited. Stanley slept. The city turned in its restless sleep, dreaming of tomorrow's headlines and yesterday's lies. Somewhere in a theater that didn't need walls, a spotlight was warming up for the next act. The crisis room at Vought Tower never slept. 43 monitors lined 3 walls each, displaying a different feed: news networks, social media trends, police scanners, internal surveillance. The air smelled like energy drinks and desperation. At 4 in the morning, the skeleton crew of 6 analysts were supposed to be monitoring routine overnight chatter. Instead, they were watching something that shouldn't exist. "Run it again," said Marcus Webb, senior media analyst, 3rd shift. He leaned forward in his ergonomic chair, eyes locked on monitor 17. The footage played. Convenience store 5th and Lexington. Timestamp 2:17 a.m. 3 frames of darkness, then green. Impossible green. A figure that moved wrong, bent physics like it was made of rubber, turned bullets into party favors. Source time. Webb didn't look away from the screen. "NYPD body cam," said the junior analyst to his left, a woman named Chen who'd been awake for 16 hours straight. "Responding officers." They arrived 4 minutes after the incident. Found 3 suspects tied up with electrical wire and... She paused, checked her notes. And a defaced Vought logo sticker on the primary suspect's forehead. Webb's jaw tightened. "Define defaced." Chen brought up a still image. Clean white sticker. Blue Vought logo. Red X drawn across it in thick marker. The room went quiet. "Get Ashley," Webb said. "Now." Stanley Ipkiss stood in the service corridor behind the Grand Marquis ballroom, invisible in his black vest and white shirt, carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes toward the kitchen. This was his Tuesday night clearing tables at Vought-sponsored events, making $12 an hour, plus the occasional tip from drunk executives who mistook him for the help they liked rather than the help they ignored. The ballroom was hosting a community appreciation mixer for Rising Star Initiative's Vought's program for B-tier heroes who hadn't quite made the national roster. Translation franchised soups who generated revenue in secondary markets without demanding primetime coverage. Stanley had learned the vocabulary. Worked here 6 months, kept his head down, smiled when required. Tonight, he wasn't smiling. Through the service door's window, he could see them. 4 rising stars in their color-coordinated suits, flashbang in electric blue, groundswell in earth tones, spectrum in prismatic armor, and barricade in matte black tactical gear. They stood in a loose semicircle around a woman Stanley recognized from last week's event. Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. She'd been serving hors d'oeuvres, same as him, same invisible status. Now she stood with her back to the wall, phone in hand, face pale. "You filmed us," Flashbang said. His voice carried that particular tone, friendly concern, wrapped around a steel core. The kind of voice that sold insurance and buried evidence. That's problematic. "I didn't mean to," Sarah said. It was an accident. The camera was already on when you saw something you shouldn't have." Groundswell stepped closer. Her power let her manipulate concrete and asphalt. Stanley had watched her reshape a decorative fountain earlier, showing off for donors. Now she flexed her fingers, and the floor beneath Sarah's feet rippled slightly. "We had a private conversation with that vendor. About payment disputes. Business stuff." Stanley's grip tightened on the tray. He'd seen that conversation. Watched through the kitchen door as these four cornered a caterer who'd threatened to go public about unpaid invoices. Watched Barricade grab the man by the throat, lift him off the ground, while Spectrum recorded the whole thing on her phone insurance leverage proof. Sarah had been in the wrong place with her camera app open. "Delete it," Flashbang said. Still friendly, still concerned. "Right now. We'll watch. Then we'll all forget this happened." "I already deleted it," Sarah whispered. "Cloud backup," Spectrum said. She was younger than the others, maybe 23, with that particular kind of cruelty that came from never being told no. "Show us your account. Show us the recently deleted folder." Sarah's hands shook as she unlocked her phone. Stanley set down the tray, quietly, on a service cart. His messenger bag hung from a hook near the staff lockers. Inside it, wrapped in an old t-shirt, the mask waited. He'd told himself he wouldn't. Not again. Once was a mistake, a moment of weakness, a line crossed that he'd promised to uncross. But Sarah's hands were shaking. And these people, these heroes, these products, these things wearing human faces and selling heroism, like it was laundry detergent, were explaining to her how accidents happen to people who don't understand their place. Stanley reached into his bag. The mask was warm, always warm, like it had a pulse. He looked at it. Wood grain, green paint that seemed to shift in the fluorescent light. Yellow eyes that weren't painted on so much as carved from something deeper. "Just this once," he whispered. "One more time." The mask didn't answer. It never did. Stanley pressed it to his face. The transformation hit like lightning channeled through synapses that weren't designed to handle it. Stanley's skin went green, bright as poison, smooth as plastic. His bones stretched and compressed simultaneously, reshaping according to rules that had nothing to do with biology. His clothes shifted. The black vest became a yellow zoot suit. The white shirt became crimson silk. The world sharpened. Colors became louder. Sounds gained texture. Reality itself felt negotiable. The mask stepped into the hallway. "Evening, folks." His voice boomed like a game show host announcing the grand prize. "I see we're having a private discussion about intellectual property rights. Mind if I mediate?" The four soups turned as one. Flashbang moved first instinct training panic. His power generated concentrated light bursts, essentially stun grenades from his palms. He raised both hands and fired. The corridor filled with white light, hot enough to sear retinas. The mask pulled a pair of comically oversized sunglasses from his jacket pocket, star-shaped frames, lenses the size of dinner plates. He slid them on. "Bright idea," he said, "but I prefer mood lighting." He snapped his fingers. The fluorescent tubes overhead didn't shatter. They changed. Every bulb in the corridor shifted spectrum, bathing everything in red and blue stage lights. A disco ball descended from the ceiling, a ceiling that had been solid concrete 3 seconds ago. Groundswell slammed her palm against the floor. Concrete rippled, rose up in a wave meant to crash over the intruder and bury him in building material. The mask tap-danced up the wave like it was a staircase, feet moving in a blur, each step producing a little puff of sparkles. He reached the crest, struck a pose, and the concrete froze mid-surge. "Innovative use of municipal infrastructure," he said, examining his nails. "But you forgot the permit." He pulled a giant rubber stamp from behind his back, "Denied" in red letters. He stamped the air. The concrete wave collapsed back into the floor, smooth as glass. Barricade was already moving. His power was simple invulnerability and enhanced strength. Not flashy, just effective. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, grabbed for the mask's throat with hands that could bend steel. His fingers closed on air. The mask had become 2-dimensional, flat, as a cartoon cell rotating 90 degrees, so Barricade's grip passed through empty space. He popped back to 3 dimensions behind the soup. Physical contact without consent. The mask tisked. "That's page 1 of the harassment handbook." He produced said handbook from thin air, a massive leather-bound tome labeled VOT Employee Conduct Standards. He swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with Barricade's head with a sound like a church bell being struck by a dump truck. The invulnerable Supe went down. Spectrum screamed not in fear and rage, and her power flared. She could generate hard light constructs, usually weapons or shields. Now she made a cage geometric bars of solidified photons that materialized around the mask. "Got you," she hissed. The mask looked at the bars, looked at her, grinned. Lovely craftsmanship. He produced a nail file and began filing through the hard light bars. They dissolved like sugar in rain. But the structural integrity needs work. He stepped through the collapsing cage casual as a man exiting an elevator. "Now then," he said, adjusting his tie. "Let's discuss workplace ethics." He moved faster than physics should permit. One moment he was across the corridor. The next he was face to face with Flashbang holding something. A mirror, full-length ornate frame appeared from nowhere. "Take a good look," the mask said, angling the mirror so Flashbang saw his own reflection. "See that? That's what you're selling. What VOT packages and ships to every desperate city in America. You're not a hero. You're a franchise." He spun the mirror. Now it reflected Groundswell, showing her in her earth tone suit with the corporate logo on her chest. "And you, bending the world to threaten someone who makes $12 an hour. Heroic." Spectrum next. The mirror showed her phone still in her hand, still recording. Insurance policies and blackmail. Very inspirational. He turned to Barricade, groaning on the floor. "And you, strong enough to lift cars using it to grab throats. Your origin story must be fascinating." The mask set down the mirror. It didn't fall, just floated there, rotating slowly, reflecting each of them in sequence. Then he pulled out 4 objects from his jacket name tags. The adhesive kind. The kind that said, "Hello, my name is." He'd already filled them in, for rent. He slapped one on each soup's forehead. The adhesive stuck like industrial glue. "Consider yourselves rebranded," he said. "Effective immediately." Sarah Mitchell stood pressed against the wall phone, clutched to her chest, eyes wide. The mask turned to her, and his grin softened just slightly, just enough. "Delete your backup or don't," he said. "Your call. But these 4 won't be bothering you about it." He tipped an imaginary hat. The light snapped back to normal fluorescent. The disco ball vanished. The mirror disappeared mid-rotation. The mask was gone. Sarah ran. The 4 rising stars sat or lay in the corridor, each wearing a name tag they couldn't remove, each one carrying the knowledge that something had just made them irrelevant. At Vought Tower, Monitor 17 updated with new footage. Service corridor. Grand Marquee event. Timestamp 22:47 p.m. Ashley Barrett, Vice President of Hero Management, watched it 3 times without speaking. Her perfectly maintained composure cracked like ice under pressure. "What the hell is that?" she finally said. "Unknown," Webb replied. "No match in any database. Not Compound V. Doesn't register on any enhancement spectrum we've tested. It just humiliated 4 contracted heroes." "Yes. Left them with..." Ashley checked the report. "Name tags. For rent name tags." "Yes." She closed her eyes, breathed, opened them. "Threat assessment. Unclear. Capability seems unlimited. But methodology is..." Webb searched for the word. "Theatrical. It didn't kill anyone. Didn't cause permanent harm. It just made them look ridiculous." "Which is worse?" Ashley said quietly. "Dead heroes are martyrs. Humiliated heroes are liabilities." She picked up the red phone on her desk. Direct line. No recording. It rang twice. "We have a problem," she said when it connected. "Not a powered threat, not exactly. More like..." She watched the green figure bend reality on screen. "More like a malfunction in the narrative." The voice on the other end said something brief. "Yes," Ashley confirmed. "I think it's time. Send him." She hung up. Somewhere in Vought Tower, in a room without windows or designation on any floor plan, a figure rose from a chair. Black tactical suit, black mask covering a face no one in the company had ever seen. Black Noir didn't speak, didn't ask questions, didn't require briefing documents or target profiles. He simply moved toward the door, toward the night, toward the hunt. On the workbench beside his chair lay his equipment knives, smoke grenades, the tools of silent work. He gathered them with methodical precision. The lights in the room didn't flicker. The air didn't change. But the temperature dropped 3 degrees. Noir stepped into the hallway. The hunt had begun. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Vought Security Solutions had cordoned off 8 square blocks in the meatpacking district, citing a gas leak that didn't exist. City officials didn't ask questions, they rarely did, when Vought made requests. The area cleared by midnight. Streetlights stayed dark. Traffic cameras looped footage from 3 hours prior. A dead zone. Perfect hunting ground. At the center, in an alley between 2 shuttered warehouses, 3 men in ski masks staged a mugging. Professional actors hired through a shell company, paid enough to keep quiet and not ask why. They grabbed a woman, another actor, and made noise. Enough noise to draw attention, enough fear to trigger intervention. Bait. Black Noir waited on the rooftop 4 buildings east, flat against the concrete, invisible in his matte black tactical suit. No thermal signature, the suit handled that. No movement training handled that. He'd been motionless for 47 minutes. He could stay motionless for 4 hours more if needed. Patience was a weapon. Silence was armor. Below, the actors performed. The woman screamed on cue. The muggers threatened. Predictable theater designed to draw out something that thrived on theater. Noir's fingers rested on the hilt of his knife, waiting. The alley lights died. Not gradually, instantly. Every bulb, every emergency exit sign, every distant street lamp gone. Noir didn't move. His night vision was already active, painting the world in green-scale clarity. The laughter started. It began as a whisper built like a wave, echoed from angles that made no acoustic sense. The sound wrapped around the alley came from above and below, simultaneously defied direction. Spotlight. Pure white. No visible source. The figure stood center stage, green skin, luminous yellow suit, bright enough to hurt. Arms spread wide, grin splitting his face like a wound. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mask's voice boomed. "Thank you for coming to tonight's performance of..." Noir dropped from the rooftop. 4 stories. Silent. He twisted mid-air knife already drawn, targeting the neck, quick, clean, professional. The fall would provide momentum. Body weight plus gravity plus blade angle equals severance. The mask's head tilted, not turning to look. Just awareness. Noir's blade swept toward green skin. The mask bent backward, spine curving at an angle that would have snapped bone, and Noir's knife passed through empty air. He landed in a roll, came up ready, already repositioning. "Ooh, shy, audience member." The mask straightened vertebrae, popping back into place with cartoon sound effects. "Don't worry, there's plenty of..." Noir attacked again. No banter, no warning. 3 strikes in rapid succession, throat, solar plexus, femoral artery. Textbook, efficient. The mask's body responded to each strike. Throat compressed like rubber, bounced back. Solar plexus absorbed the impact, rippled like water. The leg strike connected with substance that felt like firm gelatin. No blood, no damage. Just wrongness. Noir switched tactics. Grabbed for the mask itself, the wooden face the source. If the power came from the object, remove the object. His fingers closed on the edge of the green surface. Contact. For half a second, maybe less, maybe more time felt negotiable. Noir felt it. The mask wasn't wood, wasn't paint. It was something older, something that predated material classification. His fingers touched, and the world glitched. The mask's laughter stuttered. Skipped like a corrupted audio file. The yellow suit flickered, static interference gone for a frame and back again. The spotlight above dimmed, brightened, dimmed. Reality hiccuped. The mask's grin faltered. His eyes, those burning yellow eyes, went wide. Not in fear, in surprise. Noir pulled, hard. The mask shifted, moved a fraction of an inch, began to separate from green skin. The world snapped back. The mask's hand shot up, caught Noir's wrist. The grip was wrong, too strong, 2 elastic fingers that wrapped an extra rotation around bone. "Well," the mask said, voice lower now, less theatrical, more focused. That was new. He twisted. Noir let go, rolled backward, created distance. His tactical instinct screamed, wrong frequency, wrong target. Abort, but Noir didn't abort. He recalibrated. The mask straightened his suit, adjusted his tie. The flicker was gone. The glitch had passed. But something in his posture had changed. Less showman, more aware. "You actually touched it," the mask said, and there was something almost curious in his tone. "Most people try to hit me. You went for the source? Smart." Noir pulled a smoke grenade from his belt, armed it, threw it. The canister hit the ground, released its payload, thick gray smoke designed to obscure thermal and visual targeting. The mask waved his hand. The smoke formed a perfect sphere, compressed, became a baseball. He caught it, examined it, tossed it up and down. "Interesting technique," he said, "but I prefer my smoke with mirrors." He threw the smoke ball at the wall. It exploded not into smoke, but into 1,000 tiny mirrors, each one reflecting Noir from a different angle. The alley became a kaleidoscope of black-suited assassins. Noir moved through the reflections, ignoring the visual chaos. He'd trained in sensory deprivation, trained blind, trained deaf. Sight was optional. He drew 3 throwing knives, calculated trajectory based on the mask's last position, threw in a spread pattern designed to cover movement vectors. The knives flew true. They hit the mask chest, shoulder, abdomen. Each knife sank into green flesh, then transformed. The blades became rubber, flopping uselessly. The handles became daisies. The mask plucked them out one by one, sniffed the flowers. "How thoughtful," he said. "But I'm allergic." He sneezed. The flowers exploded into pollen that filled the alley golden dust that caught the impossible spotlight. Noir didn't sneeze, didn't cough. His suit's filtration system handled particulates. He closed the distance again this time, going low, sweeping the mask's legs while simultaneously reaching for the wooden face. The mask toppled backward, allowed himself to topple. But his hand intercepted Noir's grab. This time, no contact with the mask itself. "Once was free," the mask said, hitting the ground in a deliberately graceful sprawl. "Twice costs admission." The ground beneath Noir became a trap door, not breaking apart, just becoming a door. He fell through into darkness that shouldn't exist beneath asphalt and concrete. He dropped 3 feet, hit solid ground, rolled, came up ready. He was in a spotlight, center stage. Around him, velvet curtains, red plush impossible surrounded a circular platform. Beyond the curtains, darkness. Audience darkness. The kind that holds 1,000 eyes. The mask appeared stage left now, wearing a tuxedo and top hat, carrying a cane. "Welcome to the main event." His voice echoed with applause that came from nowhere. "Our guest tonight, a man of mystery, a silent professional, a walking lawsuit waiting to happen." Noir moved. 3 steps closing distance, knife in reverse grip for close quarters work. The stage rotated beneath his feet, a turntable suddenly spinning. Noir adjusted, maintained balance, didn't slow. The mask tap-danced backward, each step producing a musical note. He doesn't speak, he doesn't smile. He's contractually obligated to be terrifying. Noir feinted left, struck right blade aimed at the junction of jaw and throat. The mask's head detached, floating upward like a balloon, while his body continued dancing. "Decapitation," the floating head announced. Classic move, but somewhat difficult when the neck is more of a suggestion. The head descended, reattached with a wet pop. Noir tried again for the mask, faster this time, no telegraph. Pure speed and precision. His fingers brushed the edge. The glitch returned, sharper. Reality stuttered like film skipping frames. The mask's face froze, mouth open, mid-laugh eyes locked in place. The spotlight above flickered rapidly, strobing. For 1 full second, Noir had his fingers on the mask's edge. He could feel it separating. Could sense the wrongness underneath not Stanley's face, but something between. Some space where the transformation wasn't complete, where reality hadn't decided what this was. He pulled. The mask's hand shot up slower than before, fighting through the glitch, and shoved Noir backward. The push had force, real force. Noir flew across the stage, hit the curtains, crashed through them into darkness. He landed on concrete, real concrete. The alley, no stage, no spotlight. The mask stood 20 feet away, breathing hard or performing breathing hard, it was impossible to tell. His suit had tear marks that weren't there before. His grin had compressed less wide, more manic. "Okay," the mask said. "New rule. No touching the merchandise." Noir reached for another knife. The mask raised his hand, not threatening, more like a stage magician about to reveal the final trick. "Intermission," he said. The world went white, not light, just absence. Pure white void that removed all reference points. When color returned 3 seconds later, Noir was alone in the alley. The actors playing muggers had fled. The bait woman was gone. No spotlight, no stage, no mask. Just Noir standing in an empty alley, holding evidence. In his palm, a fragment. Green, roughly triangular, about the size of a guitar pick. It had separated when he'd grabbed the mask torn free during the glitch. He examined it. The fragment was warm. Wooden texture, but wrong, too smooth, too alive. Paint that seemed to shift in his palm, green, becoming darker green, then lighter, then back again. Noir closed his fist around it and moved. 3 minutes later, he was gone from the district extraction route, already memorized, no trace left behind, except the fragment in his tactical pouch. The fragment arrived at Vaught's research division at 3:47 a.m., delivered by Noir, personally handed to Dr. Samantha Park, without explanation. Noir didn't explain. He pointed at the fragment, pointed at the analysis equipment, and left. Dr. Park had worked for Vaught for 9 years. She'd analyzed compound V variants, tested soup tissue samples, cataloged enhancement mutations. She'd seen biology that broke textbooks and physics that made no sense. This was different. The fragment didn't register on any scanner. No carbon signature, no molecular structure, no atomic weight. When she placed it under the electron microscope, the image came back as static. She tried spectral analysis. The machine returned an error code she'd never seen, sample undefined. She tried burning it. The fragment sat in a crucible at 1800 degrees Celsius for 40 minutes, without changing temperature, without charring, without reacting. She tried freezing it in liquid nitrogen. It stayed warm. At 6:23 a.m., she called Ashley Barrett. "It's not compound V," Dr. Park said without preamble. "It's not biological. It's not technological. As far as our equipment can determine, it's not anything. But it is something. And whatever it is, it has a focal point." "Explain," Ashley said. "The fragment maintains consistent temperature. It pulses very slightly, about 60 times per minute. And when I isolated it in the resonance chamber, it oriented itself, north-northwest, like a compass. Like it's pointing towards something. Toward what? Toward wherever the source is. The mask. The person wearing it, I can't tell you what this is, but I can tell you it wants to go home." Silence on the line. Then, "Document everything. Classification level black. No written reports. Verbal briefing only directly to me." "Understood. But Ms. Barrett, there's one more thing." "What?" "When Noir grabbed the mask, when this piece separated, he created a vulnerability. We now know the power isn't internal. It's the object. The mask is the source." Ashley's voice went cold. "Can we replicate it?" "Unknown, but we can target it. If the mask can be removed, the threat ends." "Good. Prepare a brief for Homelander. If this thing shows up again, we need him ready." "Are you sure that's—" "Doctor, prepare the brief." The line went dead. "Doctor." Park looked at the fragment in its containment unit. Glowing faintly green, pulsing like a heartbeat, pointing northwest towards something that shouldn't exist, but did. Somewhere in the city, in a small apartment with a broken heater and water-stained ceiling, Stanley Ipkiss slept. The mask sat on his nightstand, unlocked drawer forgotten. If he'd been awake, he might have noticed the hairline crack along the mask's left edge barely visible, already healing, sealing itself with logic that had nothing to do with woodworking. The mask remembered being touched, being hurt, being almost separated from its host. It didn't like that. The laughter in the dark was quieter tonight, more thoughtful, more patient. The safe house in Red Hook smelled like stale coffee and old grudges. 3 floors above a defunct textile warehouse, windows blacked out with contractor paper floors covered in mismatched furniture that looked stolen because it was. The boys had occupied this particular hole for 6 weeks, long enough to establish patterns, but not long enough to get comfortable. Comfort was a liability in their line of work. Billy Butcher stood at the main table, a door propped on cinder blocks, studying surveillance photos spread across its surface. 11 images printed from various sources, each showing the same impossible green figure in different contexts. Convenience store, corporate event, meatpacking district. "It's hunting Vought," Butcher said. Not a question, a conclusion. Huey Campbell sat on a folding chair near the space heater laptop, balanced on his knees, scrolling through social media feeds. Not just Vought. There's chatter on Reddit about a green vigilante who stopped a carjacking in Queens 2 nights ago. Posted by someone called Gotham Ghost 47. Says the guy turned the carjacker's gun into a banana. A banana. Mother's Milk repeated from his position near the coffee maker, skepticism heavy in his voice. He poured his 4th cup of the night black no-sugar fuel for exhaustion. "We're chasing someone who makes fruit out of firearms. We're chasing someone who makes Vought nervous," Butcher corrected. He tapped one of the photos, the Grand Marquis event 4 rising stars sitting in a corridor with name tags stuck to their foreheads. This isn't random chaos. This is targeted humiliation. Every incident, same pattern. Vought assets get made to look like the cheap merchandise they are. Frenchie looked up from his workbench, where he'd been assembling something involving circuit boards, and what appeared to be a modified police scanner. "The pattern, it is beautiful. No, not killing, not stealing. Just, how do you say, removing the mask." He grinned at his own wordplay. The corporate mask, yes, very poetic. "Very useful," Butcher said. "If this thing keeps making Vought bleed reputation, we can work with that." "We don't even know what it is," Huey said. "The footage doesn't make sense. Physics doesn't work that way. Biology doesn't work that way. It's like watching a cartoon." "Then we find whoever's holding the leash," Butcher said. "Every freak show has a handler." set down his coffee. "This doesn't feel like a weapon. Feels like something that escaped. Even better. Means it hasn't picked a side yet." Huey's laptop chimed. He clicked, red went pale. "Guys, Vought just scrubbed the Grand Marquis footage from every official source. Corporate sites, press releases, even the event photographer's portfolio. Gone in the last 20 minutes. But not from everywhere," Frenchie said, already typing on his own machine. "Because I saved copies, and I sent them to 7 different servers. And one of those servers," he clicked. A window opened. "One of those servers is very friendly to leaks." The screen showed a forum thread, 47 comments deep, all discussing shaky footage of a green figure making 4 soups look like children playing dress-up. "Beautiful," Frenchie whispered. Butcher studied the thread. "This'll spread. Vought can't contain it if it's already out. But we need to move faster. They're looking for this thing. We need to find it first." "How?" Huey asked. We don't have facial recognition for whatever that is. We don't have DNA. We don't even know if it's human. We don't need to identify it, Butcher said. We need to track it. And everything that moves leaves a pattern. He turned to M. What do we know about locations? M pulled up a map on the wall-mounted screen marked with red pins. Convenience store, 5th and Lexington. Grand Marquis Ballroom, Midtown West. Meatpacking District. Queens carjacking, if that's connected. He studied the spread. No obvious geographical pattern. Different neighborhoods, different victim profiles. But same response time, Frenchie said. Look at the timestamps. Every incident, it appears, within 3 to 7 minutes of the crime starting. Fast response. Very fast. Local, said. Has to be. Nobody gets to 4 different neighborhoods that quick unless they're already nearby. Butcher leaned closer to the map. Or unless they're following something. What do these locations have in common? Silence while they thought. Huey spoke first. Vought presence. The convenience store had Vought ads on the TV. Grand Marquis was a Vought event. Meatpacking was a Vought trap, but before that, he typed rapidly. And before that, Vought Security had run 3 operations in that district in the past month. And the carjacking, asked. Huey pulled up the Reddit post again, scrolled to the comments. Gotham Ghost 47 says it happened outside a building on Steinway Street. He checked. That's 2 blocks from a Vought Community Outreach Center. There it is, Butcher said. Not hunting Vought directly, hunting wherever Vought touches, which is everywhere. But, he paused thinking. But it's reactive, doesn't strike first, waits for a crime to happen, then intervenes. Like a vigilante, Huey said. Like bait we can use, Butcher corrected. Crossed his arms. You want to stage something. Draw it out. I want to understand what we're dealing with before Vought kills it or recruits it. Either way, we lose the leverage. Frenchie had stopped listening. He was staring at his screen, head tilted. I have something. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. They gathered around his workstation. I pulled all available camera footage from 50-meter radius around each incident, Frenchie explained. City cameras, OTMs, private security dash cams from traffic. I have a friend who installs security systems for bodegas and parking garages. He sells me access to the feeds for $200 a month, no questions. Then I run facial recognition on everyone who appears in all 3 primary locations. That's thousands of people, said. But I filter for appearances within 1 hour before the incident. And I filter for pedestrians, not vehicles. Someone who walks nearby, who is there, but not there, yes. He brought up a grid of faces. Hundreds. He clicked Refined Filtered. The grid reduced. 50 faces. 20. 10. 5. 1. The image showed a man in his 30s, unremarkable features, thinning hair, wearing a messenger bag. Captured on 3 different cameras, 3 different nights, 3 different locations, always within 40 minutes before the green figure appeared. That's proximity, not proof, said. No. But look. Frenchie expanded the image from the Grand Marquis event. The man stood in the service corridor, visible through a doorway. Timestamp 22:31 p.m. And the green one appears at 22:47, 16 minutes later. Same building. He pulled up the meatpacking footage. The man walking down the street at 1:53 a.m. Green one appears at 2:08, 15 minutes later. Same block. Could be coincidence, Huey said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Could be our remote control, Butcher said. Who is he? Frenchie ran the face through public databases. DMV records. Employment history, social media scraping. Results populated Stanley Ipkiss, age 34, address in Washington Heights. Worked part-time at Grand Marquis as event staff. No criminal record, no social media presence worth noting. Bank accounts showed minimal activity, lived alone. Nobody, MM said. Perfect nobody. Perfect cover, Butcher countered. Or perfect victim. Either way, he's connected. Huey stood up. So what, we just go knock on his door, ask him if he's controlling a reality-warping green monster? No, Butcher said. We watch, we confirm. And if he is our man, we make sure he understands who his real friends are before Vought makes him disappear. Stanley Ipkiss was having a bad morning. The mask had moved again. He'd put it in the drawer before bed. He was sure of it, 90% sure, reasonably sure, but when he woke up at 6 a.m. for his shift at the restaurant supply warehouse, it was on his nightstand. Again, sitting there, looking at him. He'd tried locking it in his closet. It appeared in the bathroom. He'd tried wrapping it in a trash bag and putting it in the dumpster outside. It was back on his pillow by evening. The mask didn't want to leave. And Stanley was running out of ways to make it. Now standing in the warehouse sorting invoices, his hands shook whenever he thought about it. About the fragment he'd felt tear loose during the fight with the Silent One. The man in black who'd actually touched the mask, who'd made reality stutter. Stanley didn't remember much from when he wore it. Fragments, impressions, laughter that felt like it came from somewhere else. But he remembered the fight, not the details, just the sensation. Being touched, feeling the mask shift. The world stuttering, something had hurt it, and the mask didn't forget. His phone buzzed. Text from Sarah Mitchell. Thank you. I don't know how you knew, but thank you. Got your number from the staff roster. Hope that's okay. Stanley stared at the message. He hadn't known, hadn't planned. He'd just been there, been working the event, seen her in trouble, and reached for the bag. He deleted the text without responding. Stanley tried to focus on the invoices, numbers, quantities, delivery schedules, normal things. Things that didn't glow green or laugh in the dark. It didn't work. His hands still shook. The observation post was a rented van parked 3 buildings down from Stanley's apartment. MM sat in the driver's seat, Huey in the back with monitoring equipment. They'd been stationary for 4 hours. This is depressing, Huey said, watching the feed from the micro camera they'd placed across the street. If this guy's our vigilante, he's really committed to the mundane life cover. MM sipped cold coffee. Best covers are the ones you live, not act. He went to work, came home, microwaved dinner, watched TV, went to bed at 9:30. That's it. Patience? Butcher's not going to wait forever. He'll want to make contact. Butcher wants confirmation first. We give him that. The feed showed Stanley's window, 3rd floor corner apartment. Lights had been off for 90 minutes. Then at 23:47, the window lit up, not electric light, green, pulsing, rhythmic, like a heartbeat made visible. Huey leaned forward. You seeing this? I see it? The green light intensified, then faded. Intensified again. Through the window they could see movement. A silhouette standing near the bed holding something. 30 seconds later, the light vanished. Huey checked the thermal scanner. Body heat signature just spiked. Whatever happened, it happened fast. M pulled out his phone, texted Butcher *, confirmed. Visual anomaly. Target location active. The response came in 10 seconds. Do not engage. Observe only. Meet back at safe house 0200. Huey sat back. What do you think it is? Weapon symbiote possession? Don't know, MM said. But whatever it is, that man is either controlling it or being controlled by it. Which one's worse? MM didn't answer. They both knew the answer. In his apartment, Stanley stood in the dark, the mask in his hands feeling its warmth pulse against his palms. He'd tried to sleep, couldn't. The mask kept calling not with sound, but with feeling. Pressure. Insistence. It wanted out. It wanted to play. Not tonight, Stanley whispered. Please, not tonight. The mask's warmth increased. Not burning, just eager. Stanley set it on the nightstand, backed away, climbed into bed. Pulled the covers up like they could protect him from what he'd invited into his life. Outside, in a van that smelled like surveillance and desperation, two men watched a window and wondered what kind of weapon they'd found. 3 miles away, in a safe house that smelled like coffee and old grudges, Billy Butcher studied the photo of Stanley Ipkiss and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a smile that meant he'd found leverage. And in the world Billy Butcher inhabited, leverage was the only currency that mattered. Stanley was locking the door to his apartment when he realized someone was already inside. Not a sound, not movement. Just the certainty that comes from living alone long enough to know when the emptiness has been violated. He stood in the hallway, key still in the locked messenger bag over his shoulder, and considered his options. Running seemed reasonable. Calling the police seemed futile. Going inside seemed stupid. He went inside. The door chain hung broken, still attached to the frame, but bent at an angle that spoke of professional entry. Quick, quiet. The kind of work that left no splintered wood, just failure. The man sitting in Stanley's one decent chair, a thrift store recliner with a broken footrest, looked like violence wrapped in a cheap coat. Dark hair, darker expression. The kind of face that had seen terrible things and decided to become one of them. Stanley Ipkiss, the man said. British accent. Casual tone that didn't match the tension in his shoulders. We need to have a chat. Stanley's hand moved toward his messenger bag. Instinct. Panic. I wouldn't, the man said. And there was a gun on the table beside him. Not pointed, just present, a reminder of possibilities. Not yet, anyway. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to offer you something better than whatever Vaught's planning. Stanley's hand stopped. I don't know what you're talking about. Course you don't. The man stood. Not tall, but solid. The kind of solid that came from breaking things professionally. You're just a bloke who happens to show up 40 minutes before a green cartoon nightmare humiliates Vaught's finest. Coincidence. Happens all the time. 3 more people filed in from Stanley's bedroom. A younger man with nervous energy and kind eyes. A built guy who moved like a soldier, trying not to break furniture. A Frenchman with wild hair and a laptop bag. Stanley's apartment suddenly felt very small. My name's Butcher, the British man said. This is Huey MM and Frenchie. We hunt soups for a living, and you, Stanley, have something we very much want to understand. Stanley's throat went dry. I don't have anything. No. Butcher walked to Stanley's nightstand, opened the drawer, the one Stanley had locked, the one that never stayed locked. Inside the mask sat perfectly centered, glowing faintly in the dim light. Butcher stared at it. His hand moved toward it, then stopped. Something in his survival instincts said not to. "That's not nothing," he said. "That's a weapon of mass humiliation. And right now, Vought wants it dead or controlled. We want it making their lives hell." Huey stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture that was probably meant to be calming. "Look, we're not trying to scare you. We just want to talk. 5 minutes. Then we'll leave if you want." 5 minutes, Stanley repeated. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. M.M. closed the door. Not threatening, just securing. "You've been wearing that thing," he said. "Making appearances, turning Vought assets into punchlines. You even know what you're doing when you put it on." Stanley looked at the mask, at these 4 strangers in his home, at the life he'd been trying to keep normal despite the wooden face that refused to leave. "I don't remember most of it. Just pieces, feelings." "That's the problem with magic," Frenchie said, sitting cross-legged on Stanley's floor like they were old friends. "It does not ask permission. It simply is." He grinned. "I like this. Very pure." Butcher picked up the mask. Stanley tensed, but Butcher handled it carefully, turning it over in his hands. "Where'd you get it?" "Pawn shop, 3 months ago. It was..." Stanley struggled for words. "It was cheap. $10. The guy said it was from an estate sale. Some collector. And you just bought it." "I liked the craftsmanship." Butcher set it down. "And when'd you first put it on?" Stanley sat on his bed. The weight of the last few weeks crashed down. 6 weeks ago. I'd had a bad day, bad week, bad year, really. I was looking at it and I wanted to be someone else. Something else. "So you tried it on," M.M. said, and everything changed." Stanley's hands shook. He clasped them together. "I don't remember the first time clearly. I woke up in an alley 4 blocks away. My clothes were different. There was confetti in my hair. And 3 muggers were tied to a fire hydrant with their own shoelaces." Huey sat on the floor beside Frenchie. "That must have been terrifying." "It was. It is. I've tried to get rid of it, tried to lock it away, but it keeps coming back. And every time I see something wrong, something that makes me angry, I feel it calling." "Calling how?" Butcher asked. "Like it knows. Like it can feel when I'm upset. When I see people with power hurting people without it." Stanley looked at the mask. "And it wants to do something about it." Butcher pulled a phone from his pocket, brought up a photo, showed it to Stanley. "You know where this is?" The image showed a venue. Elegant, corporate, the Grand Marquis. "I work events there sometimes," Stanley said. "Catering staff." "Tonight they're hosting a damage control gala," Butcher said. "Private event. Vought's bringing in the 4 rising stars you embarrassed last week, along with their sponsors, their handlers, and about 60 rich bastards who pay to shake hands with heroes. They're going to announce a new community initiative. Lots of cameras, lots of press, all carefully controlled." He put the phone away. "They're going to use this event to bury your little show. Make those 4 look sympathetic. Victims of a terrorist attack. They'll have security. They'll have talking points. They'll rewrite the narrative so tight that in 3 days nobody will remember those soups got made to look like fools." Stanley stared at him. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to crash their party," Butcher said. "I want you to put on that mask and do what you do best. Make them look like the frauds they are, on camera, where they can't spin it away. You're insane. I'm practical." Butcher leaned against the wall. "Vaught's already looking for you. They've got facial recognition pulling persons of interest from 3 different locations. You're in their system as a maybe someone who shows up near incidents. They haven't connected the dots yet, but they will. It's only a matter of time before some analyst runs the pattern and puts your face on a killer capture list. Or MM added. They'll try to make you work for them, put you on a leash, turn whatever that thing is into another product they can sell. Stanley felt sick. We're offering you a third option, Butcher said. Work with us. 1 night, 1 event. You do what you've already been doing. Expose them, humiliate them, make the truth impossible to ignore. We'll handle the technical side. Make sure the footage gets out. Make sure it can't be buried. And then what? Stanley asked. And then you're a problem they can't solve quietly. You become too public to disappear, too viral to contain. You survive. Huey spoke up, voice softer. We're not asking you to kill anyone. We're not asking you to be a weapon. We're just asking you to be what you've already been, a guy who shows up when powerful people abuse the weak. Stanley looked at each of them. Butcher, who radiated calculation and barely restrained violence. MM, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else but understood necessity. Frenchie, who seemed genuinely fascinated by the chaos. Huey, who looked as scared as Stanley felt. What if I say no? Stanley asked. Then we leave, Butcher said. And you wait for Vought to find you on their own. Which they will. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. Doesn't matter. You're on their radar. The clock's ticking. Stanley's gaze drifted to the mask. It seemed to pulse in the drawer. Waiting, eager. His hands were shaking. He clasped them together to stop the trembling, but it didn't work. If I do this, Stanley said slowly, voice tight like he was holding on to the last piece of solid ground before falling, I have conditions. Butcher's eyebrow raised. Go on. No one dies. The words came out fast, desperate. Whatever happens, no one gets killed. Not the soups, not the guests, not the staff. The mask, it doesn't kill, it humiliates. That's the line. That's the only line I have left. Acceptable, Butcher said immediately. Then, with a slight smirk, humiliation, only violence. Very progressive. Vaught's PR team will love that. And when it's done, you help me get away. New identity, new city, whatever it takes to actually disappear. MM nodded. We can do that. And Stanley's voice hardened. You don't touch the mask. None of you. It's not a tool you can borrow. It's not a weapon you can study. When this is over, it stays with me until I figure out how to get rid of it for good. His hands were still shaking, but his eyes were clear. This wasn't negotiation. This was survival. The last wall between him and becoming just another asset in someone else's war. Silence. Butcher studied Stanley for a long moment, then extended his hand. Deal, he said. Stanley looked at the hand, looked at the mask, thought about the woman in the alley, Sarah, scared and cornered, thought about the soups with their perfect smiles and empty threats, thought about the clerk behind the counter, the gun at his head, the powerlessness. He shook Butcher's hand. Good, Butcher said. Now let's talk logistics. The planning took an hour. Frenchie spread schematics across Stanley's kitchen table, blueprints of the Grand Marquis security camera locations, emergency exits. MM outlined the extraction route, 3 fallback positions, a signal system for abort scenarios. Huey explained his role, civilian safety. If things went wrong, he'd coordinate getting bystanders clear. "I've seen what happens when soups lose control in crowded spaces," he said quietly. "We're not adding bodies to Vaught's PR spin." Butcher detailed the technical setup. "Frenchie's installing a dead man switch on their broadcast system. Every time they try to cut the feed, it'll bounce to backup servers. Vaught's going to try to contain this. We're making sure they can't." Stanley listened, feeling like he was agreeing to jump off a cliff. "What about afterward?" he asked. "When Vaught comes looking for revenge?" "That's where the footage helps," MM said. "You become a public figure. Anonymous, but public. Someone the internet knows about. That makes you harder to quietly disappear. Unless they just kill me in the street. They won't." Butcher's certainty was unsettling. "Killing you makes you a martyr. Makes the mask a legend. They'll want to discredit you, contain you, spin you. But they can't do that if you're dead and viral." "Comforting," Stanley muttered. Frenchie closed his laptop. "The event starts at 8 p.m. Security sweeps at 7. We need you inside by 7:15, already transformed. Can you control when the mask activates?" Stanley shook his head. "It activates when I put it on. And once it's on..." He trailed off. "Once it's on, Stanley's not driving anymore," Huey finished. "Exactly." Butcher nodded. "Then we time it perfect. You go in as Stanley. Find a quiet spot, bathroom, service corridor, somewhere without cameras. Put on the mask. Then let it do what it does." "And you're sure this will work?" Stanley asked. "No," Butcher said. "But it's better odds than waiting for Vaught to kick in your door." Stanley wanted to argue. Wanted to say this was insane, that he should just leave the city, leave the mask behind, and never look back. But he'd tried that. The mask always came back. And somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the fear and rational objections, he felt something else. Anger. At the people who wore capes and called it justice. At the corporations who sold heroism like breakfast cereal. At a world where the powerful crushed the weak and called it order. The mask felt that anger, fed on it, grew warm in its drawer. "Okay," Stanley said. "I'll do it." They left at midnight. MM gave Stanley a burner phone. Huey left instructions for emergency contacts. Frenchie promised the technical setup would be beautiful like art. Butcher lingered at the door. "You're scared," he said. "Not a question." "Terrified," Stanley admitted. "Good. Means you're thinking clearly." Butcher's expression shifted, not softer, but more honest. "You don't have to be brave. You just have to show up. The mask will handle the rest." "That's what I'm afraid of." Butcher smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Then be afraid tomorrow. Tonight get some sleep. Tomorrow night we make Vaught bleed." He left. Stanley locked the door. All 3 locks. Knowing it wouldn't matter. He walked to the nightstand, opened the drawer. The mask looked up at him. In the darkness of his apartment, with only streetlight filtering through thin curtains, it almost looked alive. The wood grain seemed to shift. The carved features seemed to breathe. Stanley reached for it, then stopped. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "One more time, then never again." The mask didn't respond. But Stanley could have absolutely sworn that the carved mouth grew wider. Just a fraction. Just enough to look like anticipation. He closed the drawer and climbed into bed, knowing he wouldn't sleep, knowing that somewhere in the city, Vaught was preparing their narrative, and Butcher was preparing his countermove. and 4 humiliated soupies were being coached on their redemption arc. And in a drawer that shouldn't need a lock, something wooden and ancient and hungry was counting down the hours until it could play again. The show, it seemed, was far from over. The show was just getting started. The Grand Marquis Ballroom gleamed like a jewel box designed to hold expensive lies. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across tables draped in white linen. 500 guests in tailored suits and designer dresses mingled beneath banners that read, "Rising Together, a Vought Community Initiative." On stage, a podium waited. Behind it, a massive screen cycled through images of the 4 rising stars doing charity work that may or may not have actually happened. Flashbang, Groundswell, Spectrum, Barricade. They stood in the VIP section, freshly media-trained, wearing expressions that suggested humility and resilience. Their handlers had done good work. The name tags were gone. The humiliation was being reframed. Tonight was about redemption. Ashley Barrett watched from the wing's tablet in hand, monitoring 6 different feeds simultaneously. Security checkpoints, live stream metrics, social media sentiment. Everything had to be perfect. This event was damage control masquerading as celebration, and she'd staked her position on making it work. "Audio check," she said into her headset. "Clear," came the response from the booth. "Camera feeds." All 5 locked and streaming. Internal only, no external broadcast until we go live at 8:15. "Good. Keep it that way until I give the word." She scanned the crowd. Politicians, donors, influencers, local news anchors who'd agreed to softball questions. Everyone vetted. Everyone controlled. Nothing could go wrong. In the service corridor behind the kitchen, Stanley Ipkiss stood in a supply closet that smelled like bleach and regret. He wore his server uniform, black vest, white shirt, bow tie that felt like a noose. His messenger bag hung from a hook on the back of the door. Inside the bag, the mask waited. Stanley's hand shook as he checked his watch. 7:17. Butcher's voice echoed in his memory. "Find a quiet spot. Put it on. Let it do what it does. Simple. Terrifying." He unzipped the bag. The mask stared up at him, wood grain seeming to ripple in the fluorescent light. It was warm. It was always warm now. Like something alive and eager. "Last time," Stanley whispered. "After tonight, I find a way to end this." The mask didn't respond, but Stanley could feel it. Anticipation, hunger, the promise of a stage and an audience. He picked it up. The wood felt smooth against his palms, almost soft, like it was adjusting to his grip. He raised it to his face, hesitated for one final second, and pressed it on. The transformation was lightning and madness, compressed into a single moment. Stanley's skin went emerald bright and unnatural. His bones restructured according to geometry that had nothing to do with anatomy. His server uniform became a yellow zoot suit with crimson accents. His fingers lengthened, became elastic. His face stretched into a grin that could swallow reason whole. Stanley disappeared. The mask remained. He looked at his reflection in the supply closet's metal shelving. Perfect. Absurd. Powerful. "Showtime," he said, and his voice was silk wrapped around knives. He stepped out of the closet into the service corridor. 2 security guards stood 20 feet away, monitoring the kitchen entrance. The mask snapped his fingers. The lights went out. Frenchie sat in a van 3 blocks away, surrounded by laptops and equipment that hummed with barely legal processing power. His fingers flew across keyboard screens, cycling through code and camera feeds. "Dead Man Switches live," he said into his headset. They try to cut main feed, it bounces to 17 backup servers. They cut those, it goes to burner accounts seeded across 6 social platforms. I've been building the network for 3 weeks. They cut those. He grinned. The venue Wi-Fi is compromised. Every device connected gets a push notification with a mirror link. Not magic. Just very, very dirty. Elegant, MM said from the driver's seat, voice flat. He was monitoring police scanners, tracking response times, calculating evacuation routes. Just make sure it works. It will work because I'm an artist. Huey's voice crackled through the comm. I'm positioned near the emergency exits. East side. If things go bad, I can start moving people. They're going to go bad, Butcher said. He was in the crowd, dressed like he belonged, nursing a champagne flute filled with ginger ale. That's the point. When our green friend makes his entrance, you make sure civilians get clear. M, you ready to pull us out? Route's clean, 3 fallbacks. We're good. Then we wait, Butcher said. He glanced at his watch. 7:19. Won't be long now. The mask walked through the service corridor like he owned it, which in a metaphysical sense he did. Reality bent around him, accommodating his presence the way water accommodates a shark. He passed a server carrying a tray of champagne. The glasses rearranged themselves into a tower. The server stared. The mask winked. He rounded a corner and found the 2 security guards who'd been monitoring the kitchen entrance now facing him, hands moving toward weapons. Gentlemen, the mask said, arms spread wide. I'm here for the evening's entertainment, though I don't recall receiving an invitation. The first guard pulled a taser. Professional instinct. Good training. The mask reached into his jacket, a jacket that moments ago had no pockets, and pulled out a mirror. Full length, ornate frame. He positioned it so the guard saw his own reflection raising the taser. The guard froze. Interesting career choice, the mask said. Defending the honor of corporate products. Tell me, does Vaught's dental plan cover the grinding teeth you get from swallowing your conscience? The second guard reached for his radio. The mask snapped his fingers. The radio became a rubber duck. It squeaked. Much better communication device, the mask said. More honest. He walked past them toward the ballroom entrance, and the guards found they couldn't move. Not paralyzed. Just stuck. Like reality had decided they were background characters who didn't need mobility for this scene. The mask reached the double doors leading to the ballroom. Behind them, he could hear the murmur of 500 voices, the clink of glasses, the orchestrated harmony of controlled narrative. He placed his hands on the doors. Ladies and gentlemen, he whispered, let's discuss truth in advertising. He pushed. The ballroom doors didn't open. They exploded inward, not with force, but with confetti. Red and gold streamers erupted from the hinges, spiraling across the room like celebration gone feral. The crowd turned as one. The mask stood framed in the doorway, spotlight materializing above him from no visible source, bathing him in theatrical white light. Good evening. His voice boomed, filling the space without amplification. I see you're all gathered to witness a resurrection. How biblical. Silence. The kind that precedes disaster. Ashley Barrett's voice cut through her headset. Security removed that. The microphone in her hand became a banana. She stared at it. On stage, the 4 rising stars tensed. Flashbang's hands began to glow. The guests of honor. The mask glided forward, not walking, gliding feet barely touching the floor. Tell me, is there a PowerPoint for rebranding Humiliation? Or does Vought just beam the talking points into your skulls? Flashbang fired. Twin bursts of concentrated light hot enough to sear steel. The mask pulled an umbrella from behind his back, a beach umbrella rainbow-striped, and opened it. The light burst, hit the fabric, and became butterflies. Dozens of them. They scattered across the ballroom, harmless and surreal. Flashy, the mask said, but lacking substance, much like your entire brand. Groundswell slammed her palm on the stage floor. Concrete rippled rose in a wave designed to crash over the intruder. The mask tap-danced up the wave like a staircase. Each step produced a musical note. By the time he reached the crest, the concrete had frozen in place, forming a ramp. Impressive use of municipal infrastructure, he said, examining his nails. But I believe you're missing a permit. He pulled out a rubber stamp, denied in red letters, and stamped the air. The concrete wave collapsed back into the floor, smooth as glass, leaving no damage. The crowd began to panic. Movement toward exits, raised voices. Huey's voice in Butcher's ear. Civilians heading for east exits. I'm directing them. Keep them moving, Butcher said. He didn't move toward the exits himself. He had a camera. He was filming. Barricade charged across the stage, invulnerable skin and enhanced strength closing the distance in 3 strides. The mask reached into his jacket and pulled out a door. Red paint, brass knob. He opened it. Barricade ran through and disappeared. The door slammed. The mask hung a sign out to lunch. He'll be back, the mask said. Probably. Spectrum screamed rage, not fear, and her power flared. Hard light constructs materialized around the mask. Bars, a cage, geometric precision designed to contain. The mask examined the bars, grabbed one, bent it like taffy. Derivative, he said. I've seen this in 17 cartoons and 3 avant-garde theater productions. The execution is adequate, but the creativity... He made a so-so gesture. He stepped through the collapsing cage casual as a man exiting an elevator. Ashley Barrett had recovered from banana shock and was shouting into a headset that may or may not have been functional. Cut the feed! Cut it now! In the control booth, a technician hit the kill switch. Nothing happened. He hit it again. The main feed continued. He tried the backup cutoff. The feed multiplied. Suddenly, the event was streaming to 17 different platforms, simultaneously. Frenchie's voice came through Butcher's comm, gleeful. They are trying to cut. It is beautiful. Every attempt makes it spread further. On stage, the screen behind the podium, the one showing carefully curated images of heroism, flickered. Changed. New images appeared. Not curated, not approved. The 4 rising stars in the corridor. Name tags on their foreheads. For rent. The convenience store. Mask holding a defaced Vought logo sticker. Leaked settlement documents. ND, as with dollar amounts visible. DMCA takedown notices from Vought Legal trying to scrub footage that had already spread. Someone had spliced in footage from sources that shouldn't be together. Someone had prepared this. Butcher had spent weeks collecting scraping payroll leaks, blackmailing a junior handler who couldn't keep his mouth shut, pulling every thread that Vought thought they'd buried. Butcher smiled. The mask turned to the screen, saw his own work reflected back, and grinned wider. A highlight reel. He produced a pointer stick from nowhere. Tonight's lesson, brand versus reality. He gestured to the image of the rising stars. 4 fine specimens recently repackaged. Vaught's solution therapy and talking points. My solution. He snapped his fingers. The teleprompter, the one feeding lines to the host, who was supposed to introduce the program, went rogue. Text scrolled across every screen in the ballroom. Not a script. These are fax flashbang charges, $50,000 for appearances. Groundswell has 3 NDAS for excessive force. Spectrum's powers are sponsored by a weapons contractor. Barricade is currently in another dimension. The crowd erupted. Guests pulling out phones, filming, streaming, sharing. Ashley Barrett looked at the chaos spreading like infection and absolutely knew that her career was ending in real time. She pressed one final button on her tablet. Emergency protocol. 3 floors above the ballroom, a phone rang. Homelander picked it up. "We need you," Ashley said. "Now." The mask was addressing the crowd, part performance, part sermon, when the ceiling cracked. Not figuratively, literally. A fracture line appeared in the plaster, spreading like lightning across the ornate surface. Then impact. Homelander descended through the hole he'd made, cape billowing, landing center stage with force that cracked marble. He straightened, brushed dust from his suit, and smiled. It was his camera smile, the one that sold merchandise and military contracts. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice projection perfect, even without a microphone. "I apologize for the disturbance. There seems to be a security situation." He saw the mask, saw the green skin, the yellow suit, the grin that bent physics, saw the screens still showing leaked footage, saw the crowd filming, saw his reflection in 100 phone cameras. The smile stayed. But something behind it cracked. "You," Homelander said. "Me," the mask agreed. "Though I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm the malfunction in your narrative. You can call me a scheduling conflict." Homelander's jaw tightened. His left hand clenched and unclenched at his side, a micro-spasm he couldn't quite suppress. "This event is over. You're going to leave. Quietly. Or I remove you. Permanently." The vein at his temple was visible now, pulsing. His smile stayed fixed, but his pupils had dilated. Every second of restraint was costing him. The mask tilted his head. "Fascinating. Tell me, does the cape come with the God complex, or is that an elective in Homelander's ear?" Ashley's voice. "Keep it together. Cameras are everywhere. You're the hero. Act like it." Homelander's hands clenched. His smile widened. "I'm giving you one chance. Walk away." The mask pulled out a clipboard, appeared to consult it. "Let me check my schedule. Oh dear. It seems I'm booked solid with exposing frauds tonight. Can I pencil you in for never?" The smile finally broke. Homelander's eyes began to glow red. Huey's voice in Butcher's ear. "East exits are clear. 50 people out. But there's still 300 inside." "Get them moving," Butcher said. Should we abort?" Butcher watched Homelander's heat vision build, watched the mask stand there grinning, waiting. "No," Butcher said. "This is what we came for. Let it play." The mask looked directly at Homelander, directly at the cameras, directly at the moment where everything would either shatter or rebuild. His gaze flicked just for a heartbeat to the crowd still in the ballroom. 300 people, phones raised, recording their own potential obituaries. He snapped his fingers. Something shifted in the air, not visible, not audible, but present. "Shall we discuss?" he said. "What happens when America's greatest hero stops pretending Homelander fired?" The world went white. And somewhere in the chaos in the phones, still streaming in the feeds that couldn't be cut in the narrative that was tearing apart at its seams, the show truly began. Heat vision screamed across the ballroom twin beams of concentrated solar fury that could cut through steel-vaporized concrete, reduce flesh to ash in milliseconds. The mask stood in the path of annihilation and grinned. The beams hit and bent. Not deflected, not absorbed. Bent. Like light hitting a funhouse mirror, Homelander's heat vision curved 90 degrees, shot upward, and burned twin holes in the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Sprinklers activated. Water cascaded across the stage. The mask pulled out an umbrella, opened it. The water hitting the fabric turned into rose petals. "Close," he said. "But your aim needs work. Have you considered LASIK?" "Oh, wait." Homelander didn't let him finish. He moved with soup speed, crossing the distance in a blur fist cocked back for a punch that could crack a vault door. His fist connected with the mask's jaw. The mask's head spun. Literally spun. 360 degrees. When it stopped, the grin was somehow wider. "Solid technique," the mask said, rubbing his chin theatrically. "But you're telegraphing. Let me demonstrate proper form." He pulled a boxing glove from behind his back, comically oversized red with a spring mechanism. He wound it up like a toy. Homelander caught the punch. His hand closed around the glove. Invulnerable skin, unbreakable grip. The glove exploded into confetti. Again. "Everything you touch," the mask said, "turns to farce." "How does that feel?" "Superman." Homelander's eyes went red. Not glowing, red. Pure rage filtered through absolute power. He grabbed for the mask's throat. His hand passed through. The mask had gone two-dimensional, flat as a cartoon cell rotating, so Homelander's grip closed on air. The mask popped back to 3 dimensions behind him. "You're very grabby," the mask observed. "Are we dating? I should have brought flowers." Homelander spun, heat vision already charging. Ashley's voice in his ear, frantic. "Homelander, the feeds are still live. Every second of this is streaming. You need to..." He ripped the earpiece out, crushed it. The plastic crumpled like paper in his fist. "No more cameras," Homelander said, voice low and lethal. "No more audience, no more jokes." "But the cameras are still there," the mask said, gesturing to the crowd. "Phones, hundreds of phones. And the audience is watching. And the jokes," he tapped his temple, "the jokes are structural. You can't remove them without removing the foundation." Homelander looked at the phones, at the people filming, at his own reflection in 100 screens, red-eyed and snarling, the perfect hero facade cracked beyond repair. Something in him broke. Not his body, his restraint. He launched himself at the mask, no technique, no control, just raw power and fury. Punches that shattered the stage, kicks that cratered the floor, heat vision that carved molten lines across walls. The mask dodged each strike with cartoon physics, bending. Stretching, becoming liquid, becoming smoke, becoming a painted tunnel on the wall that Homelander crashed into. Homelander pulled himself from the wall. Plaster clung to his suit. His hair had fallen out of its perfect arrangement. He was breathing hard not from exertion, but from rage that had nowhere to go. "You're not fighting," Homelander said. "You're running." "Correction," the mask said. "I'm choreographing." "There's a difference." He snapped his fingers. The ballroom changed. Not gradually, instantly. The grand marquee vanished. The marble floor became checkerboard tiles. The crystal chandeliers became stage lights. The walls curved upward, forming a dome painted with stars that twinkled impossibly bright. They were inside a theater. A massive circular theater with no visible exits. Velvet curtains hung in impossible directions. Spotlights tracked Homelander from angles that defied geometry. And around them, in seats that extended upward into darkness, sat an audience. Thousands of them, faceless silhouettes, watching, waiting. "Welcome," the mask said, now wearing a ringmaster's outfit, complete with top hat, to the main event. Tonight's program, What Happens When Gods Bleed. Homelander turned in a circle looking for a way out. Every direction was stage. Every surface was performance space. "Where are we?" he demanded. "Exactly where we've always been," the mask said. "On stage. You've just been pretending the fourth wall existed." Homelander fired heat vision at the curtains. They burned, then regenerated fabric, knitting itself back together while still smoking. He flew upward toward the dome ceiling. It receded as he approached, always 10 feet higher than he could reach. He dove downward through the floor. He passed through checkerboard tiles into another stage identical to the one above, where another mask stood waiting with the same grin. "Physics," that mask said, "is negotiable here. Your strength is constant. Guess which one matters more?" Homelander shot back up through the floor, emerging on the original stage. The mask was waiting, holding a mirror. "Look," the mask said. "This is what America sees right now." In the mirror, Homelander, cape-torn hair, wild face contorted in fury. Every perfect angle ruined, every heroic line broken. The man behind the product exposed and ugly. Homelander punched the mirror. It shattered, then reformed. Each shard showed the same image. Hundreds of Homelanders, all furious, all imperfect, all humiliated. "You can't break what's already broken," the mask said. "The image died the moment you cared more about being worshipped than being right." Homelander grabbed him. Finally, solidly grabbed him. Fingers closed around green skin, felt substance, felt target. "Got you," Homelander hissed. "Do you?" the mask asked. Homelander lifted him, prepared to throw him with enough force to break bone, to shatter spine, to end this farce. The mask weighed nothing. Not light. Nothing. Like holding a cardboard cutout. Homelander looked down. He wasn't holding the mask. He was holding a life-sized photograph. It grinned up at him in 2 dimensions. Behind him, a voice. "Over here." Homelander spun. The mask sat in the audience, first row, eating popcorn. "You're really committed to the role," the mask said between bites. "Very method. Daniel Day-Lewis would approve." Homelander screamed. Not words, just sound. Pure frustration given voice. He unleashed everything. Heat vision in sweeping arcs. Super strength punches that pulverized stage material. He flew in patterns designed to create shock waves. He tore apart every surface he could reach. The theater absorbed it all. Healed. Reformed. Continued. And through it all, the mask watched from the audience, occasionally offering commentary. 10 out of 10 for enthusiasm. -3 for originality. That vein on your forehead is very pronounced. Have you considered yoga? Homelander stopped, floated in the center of the ruined stage that wasn't ruined anymore. His chest heaved, his hands shook. "What are you?" he asked. "A reminder," the mask said, "that power without joy is just violence. That control without humanity is just tyranny. That being worshipped," he stood, walked down the aisle toward the stage, "is not the same as being loved." Homelander descended to the stage floor. His feet touched checkerboard tiles. His fists were still clenched, but the fire in his eyes had dimmed to embers. "I could kill you," he said. "You could try." The mask agreed. But I'm not really here. Not in the way you understand. I'm a story, and stories don't die from punches. Then what do they die from? The mask tilted his head. Being forgotten, being replaced, being proven irrelevant. He gestured to the audience, those thousands of faceless watchers. They're watching both of us, the mask said, and they're deciding which story they prefer. The god who demands worship, or the fool who exposes frauds? Homelander looked at the audience, looked at the mask, looked at the impossible theater that shouldn't exist, but did. This isn't over, he said. It never is, the mask replied. But the audience is getting bored, and you, Homelander, are starting to repeat yourself. The mask snapped his fingers one final time. Reality inverted. The theater collapsed, not violently, but simply, like a stage set being struck. The curtains rolled up, the lights dimmed, the audience faded. Homelander stood in the grand marquee ballroom. Real ballroom, real floor, real damage from his rampage. But the people were gone. Not dead. Gone. The entire crowd had vanished. The ballroom was empty except for overturned tables, scattered phones still recording, and the 4 rising stars unconscious near the stage. No bodies, no blood, no casualties. Just absence. And on the main screen, a message in bright green letters. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. Homelander looked around disoriented. How long had he been in the theater? Seconds, minutes. The phones showed timestamps. 7 minutes had passed. 7 minutes that felt like hours. 7 minutes that were now recorded from every angle. Huey's voice crackled through Butcher's comm. Everyone's out. East exit service corridors, even the kitchen staff. It's like they were relocated. Butcher stood outside the venue watching the feed on his phone. The stream had caught everything. Homelander's breakdown, his fury, his absolute loss of control. Perfect. Butcher said. Confirm the package. MM's voice. Stanley's moving, 3 blocks north. He's back. Then we're done, Butcher said. Extraction point Bravo, 15 minutes. He looked at the Grand Marquis, at the building where Vought's narrative had just been demolished in real time. At the hero who'd finally shown the world what happened when gods lost their patience. Inside the ballroom, Homelander stood alone in the wreckage. His reflection stared back from 100 phone screens, each one showing the same thing, America's greatest hero reduced to a man having a tantrum. The feeds were still live. The phones were still streaming. The evidence was already spreading across platforms that Vought couldn't contain. Ashley would spin this. Vought would deploy crisis teams. Lawyers would file injunctions. PR would craft narratives about mental health and extraordinary stress. But the footage existed. The cracks existed. The moment existed. Homelander's fist clenched, unclenched, clenched again. Maeve, he said to the empty room. We need to talk. His voice echoed. No one answered. He was alone. And somewhere in the city, in an alley 3 blocks north, Stanley Ipkiss leaned against a dumpster and vomited. The mask sat beside him on the ground, innocuous wood quiet and still. The transformation reversal always hit like withdrawal. Colors too bright, sounds too loud. The memory of what he'd done, what the mask had done through him, fragmentary and overwhelming. He remembered the theater, remembered Homelander's face, remembered the moment when power met absurdity and lost. Never again, Stanley whispered. Never again. The mask didn't respond, but in the ambient light of the alley, if Stanley had been looking, he might have noticed the carved mouth seemed slightly wider than before. Satisfied. Victorious. Hungry for the next act in a show that was far from over. The sun rose over a city that didn't know it had changed yet. At 6:47 a.m., 3 hours after the Grand Marquis incident, Vaught's crisis team had assembled in Tower 7. 23 people in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Ashley Barrett stood at the head of the table tablet in handbags under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Status," she said. Marcus Webb, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight, pulled up analytics. The primary footage has spread to 47 platforms. Total views 23 million and climbing. Retweets, shares, reposts across every major social network. Memes started generating within 90 minutes. He brought up examples on the screen. Homelander's rage face captioned, "When your Wi-Fi goes down." The mask's grin captioned, "POV, your corporate America." Homelander punching empty air looped endlessly set to cartoon sound effects. "Injunctions?" Ashley asked. "Filed in 17 jurisdictions," the legal team lead said. "But it's whack-a-mole. Every takedown spawns 3 mirrors. We're fighting decentralized distribution. There's no single point of failure to target." Ashley closed her eyes, breathed. What about the narrative? The PR director, a woman named Chen who looked like she hadn't slept in a week, consulted her notes. "We're running the mental health angle. Homelander was responding to a superhuman threat with unknown capabilities, high-stress situation, split-second decisions. He contained the threat with 0 civilian casualties." 0 casualties? Ashley repeated. "That's our anchor point. The ballroom was full. Everyone walked away. That's the story." "But the optics," Webb started. "The optics are managed," Ashley cut him off. "We control Homelander. We control the message. We own the platforms that matter. This is containable." Silence around the table. The kind that said everyone knew she was lying, but no one wanted to be the first to admit it. Ashley's phone buzzed. Private line. She glanced at it, went pale. The message was from a number not in her contacts. "You spin well." But the audience has already decided which story they believe. B. She deleted it. Looked back at her team. "Get me Homelander," she said. "Now." 3 blocks from the safe house in Red Hook, Stanley. Ipkiss sat in the back of MM's van, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like motor oil and old tactical gear. He was shaking. Had been shaking for 20 minutes. Huey handed him water. "Drink. You're dehydrated." Stanley took the bottle with trembling hands. Sipped. The water tasted like metal. "The people," Stanley said. "At the event, where did they go?" Huey glanced at M, who was driving. MM's expression didn't change. "We don't know," Huey said. "One second they were there, next second gone. They started showing up at hospitals, police stations, their homes. No one remembers how they got there. Just blank time." Stanley stared at the water bottle. "The mask moved them. Looks like it." "I didn't..." Stanley's voice cracked. "I don't remember deciding to do that." "But you're glad it did," MM said from the driver's seat. Not a question. Stanley didn't answer. Because MM was right. He was glad. Terrified, sick, horrified at what the mask was becoming, but glad no one had died. Frenchie's voice crackled through the comm system. "Butcher, the uploads are stable. We have redundancy across 6 continents now. Vought can't kill this." Butcher's voice relaxed, satisfied. "Beautiful. MM, what's our ETA?" 4 minutes. Stanley holding up. Huey looked at Stanley, who looked like he might fall apart. Define holding up. He's conscious and not bleeding. Good enough. Get him inside. The van pulled into the safe house garage. A door that looked like it hadn't opened in years rolled aside, revealing a concrete space lit by a single bulb. They got Stanley inside up the stairs into the main room, where Butcher waited with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Sit," Butcher said. Stanley sat. His legs gave out more than he chose to sit, but the result was the same. Butcher poured, slid a glass across the table. "Drink?" "I don't drink." Stanley drank. The whiskey burned. He coughed, eyes watering. "Better?" Butcher said. He didn't pour himself one, just watched Stanley with the expression of a man evaluating livestock. "You did good work tonight." "I didn't do anything," Stanley said. "The mask did. You put it on. That's enough." "Is it?" Stanley looked at his hands. They'd stopped shaking. That somehow felt worse. "I can't control it anymore. Every time I wear it, I remember less. It's taking over." "Then stop wearing it," M.M. said from the doorway. "I've tried. It won't stay away." Huey sat across from Stanley. "We could help. There might be someone who knows about magical artifacts. Containment. Or," Butcher said, "you keep it. Use it. Become what Vought can't plan for." Stanley's head snapped up. "No. Think about it." "I said no." Stanley stood unsteady but firm. "That was the deal. One night. Then you helped me disappear." Butcher studied him, then nodded. "Fair. A deal's a deal." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Passport, Canadian, birth certificate, banking details for an account in Vancouver. 5,000 to start, enough to get settled." Stanley took the envelope, opened it. A face that was his but wasn't stared back from a passport photo. David Chen, born in Toronto. "The mask?" Stanley asked. "Keep it," Butcher said. "Far from us, far from Vought, far from anyone who'd try to use it. And if I can't keep it controlled..." Butcher's expression went cold. "Then you'll have bigger problems than Vought, and we'll have to have a different conversation." The threat was clear, contained. Stanley closed the envelope. "When do I leave?" "Tonight," M.M. said. "Bus to Buffalo, cross the border tomorrow morning. We've got a contact who'll get you through. And then I'm on my own." "That was always the end game," Butcher said. "You're not one of us. You're a civilian who got handed a weapon. Best thing you can do is get far away and never touch it again." Stanley looked at each of them. Butcher, who saw people as tools. M.M., who looked tired of cleaning up messes. Huey, who at least seemed to care. Frenchie monitoring feeds in the corner, half listening. "Thank you," Stanley said, "for not asking for more." Huey nodded. M.M. grunted. Butcher said nothing. Stanley walked to the corner where his messenger bag waited. The mask was inside, wrapped in the same old t-shirt, quiet and still. He picked up the bag, felt the weight of it. "The footage," Stanley said. "What happens now?" Butcher smiled. "Not friendly, victorious. Now Vought bleeds, not fatal, but enough to scar. Enough that next time they sell heroism, people will remember what happens when the product breaks down. And Homelander learns what the rest of us already know." Butcher's smile widened. "That being feared isn't the same as being respected. And when people stop respecting you, the fear stops working too." At Vought Tower, Homelander stood in his private quarters, watching the news cycle devour him. every channel, every network, every platform. The footage played on loop, his face, his rage, his absolute loss of control. The anchors were careful, professional. They used words like concerning and unprecedented and raises questions. They brought in psychologists who talked about stress and trauma. They brought in former military who discussed split-second decisions under pressure. But underneath the professional analysis, the subtext was clear. America's greatest hero had a meltdown on camera, and millions of people watched it happen. His phone had been ringing for hours. Madeline, Ashley, the board, Senator Calhoun. He'd ignored them all. There was a knock on his door, soft, tentative. "Go away," Homelander said. The door opened anyway. Ashley stepped in, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "We need to discuss next steps," she said. "Next steps," Homelander repeated. His voice was flat, empty. "What next steps, Ashley? I'm already a meme. I'm already a punchline. What exactly do you plan to spin?" "We emphasize the 0 casualties. We emphasize that you neutralized an unknown threat. I didn't neutralize anything." Homelander turned to face her. His eyes weren't glowing, just tired. "It played with me. Made me look like a child throwing a tantrum, and everyone saw." Ashley set down her tablet. "Then we rebuild. Redemption arc. You make a statement. Acknowledge the stress. Commit to therapy. America loves a comeback story." "I'm not a comeback story," Homelander said. "I'm a god." "Then act like one." Ashley's voice went hard. "Gods don't give up because one bad night. They adapt. They evolve. They remind people why they're worth worshiping." Homelander looked at her. Really looked. Saw the desperation behind the corporate speak. Saw someone trying to salvage a sinking ship with a bucket. "Get out," he said. "Homelander, get out." Ashley grabbed her tablet and left. The door closed with a soft click. Homelander stood alone in his quarters, surrounded by screens showing his failure on infinite loop, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. Not about his power. That was absolute. Unchanged. Doubt about whether power was enough. He turned off the screens, all of them. The room went dark except for the city lights filtering through bulletproof windows. "Maeve," he said to the empty room, "I know you're watching this. I know you're laughing." No answer. There never was. He sat on his couch, America's greatest hero, alone in a tower, watching his empire of adoration crack. Outside, the city breathed and moved and lived, and in a million pockets, people carried phones with footage that would outlive any spin, any narrative, any carefully crafted lie. The truth was out. And truth, Homelander was learning, was harder to kill than any soup. 2 weeks later, Stanley Ipkiss sat in a cafe in Vancouver, drinking coffee that was too expensive and reading news on a laptop he'd bought with cash. The footage was still circulating. Vought had launched 3 different PR campaigns. Homelander had made a statement, carefully worded, emotionally controlled, hitting all the right notes. Some people bought it. Many didn't. The polls showed a 12-point drop in Homelander's approval rating. Not fatal, but significant. A crack in the foundation. The boys had disappeared back into shadow. Butcher's number no longer worked. The safe house was probably empty by now, wiped clean, abandoned like all the others. Stanley's new apartment was small, 1 bedroom, view of an alley. But it was his, and no one knew he was there. The mask sat in his closet, locked box, triple wrapped. He hadn't opened it in 13 days. But he could feel it, through wood, through metal, through the distance he was desperately trying to create. It was waiting, patient now, fed, satisfied by what it had accomplished. But still hungry, Stanley closed his laptop, finished his coffee, walked back to his apartment through streets where no one knew his name, where no one recognized his face, where he was just another person trying to disappear into normalcy. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, set his keys on the counter. The locked box in his closet was open. Stanley's blood went cold. He walked to the closet, slowly, knowing what he'd find, but hoping he was wrong. The mask sat on top of his clothes, not hidden, not concealed, waiting. The carved features seemed to watch him. The wooden surface caught the light from his window, reflecting it in patterns that almost looked like movement. Stanley reached for it, stopped himself, closed the closet door, walked to his kitchen, made tea, tried to read a book, tried to sleep. At 2 a.m. he woke to laughter, soft, musical, coming from the closet. Stanley lay in bed staring at the ceiling and understood with absolute certainty the show wasn't over. It would never be over. The mask had tasted what it could do, had felt the spotlight, had proven it could bend reality and humiliate gods. And it wanted more. Stanley closed his eyes, pulled his blanket up, tried to ignore the laughter that sounded less like threat and more like invitation. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow he'd find someone who could help. A priest, an occultist, someone who dealt with things that shouldn't exist. Tomorrow. But in his closet, the mask waited. And if Wood could smile, it would have been grinning wider than physics allowed, knowing that tomorrow was just another word for next performance. And in every city where the footage had spread, in every pocket, where a phone held proof that heroes could break the narrative, had changed, not destroyed. Changed. Vought would adapt. They always did. The machine was too big to fail from one night of chaos. But the people who watched the ones who'd seen a green nightmare make a god look foolish, they remembered. And memory in the end was the only power that mattered. The city slept. The mask waited. Stanley lay awake, and somewhere in the dark, Vought's empire continued to turn slightly more fragile than before. While lawyers drafted statements and PR teams prepared campaigns, and Ashley Barrett poured another glass of wine and wondered how much longer she could keep spinning before the whole thing collapsed. The answer, she suspected, was not much longer. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight the footage lived. The memes spread. The truth remained. And in a closet in Vancouver, something wooden and ancient and hungry counted the days until its next show. The end. For now.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to turn on notification so you won't miss out future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time in this channel.